Hello, welcome back to the channel. So we're going to be talking about the Novokh Dynasty today, all the unique options that the Dynasty actually has. Then we're going to be doing a top 3 units that are, in my opinion of course, that work best in the Novokh Dynasty. And there's going to be one honourable mention from one of our YouTube paid members. So guys, if you haven't actually seen what the membership is yet, click the join button down below for more information. There are a few little perks on the Discord, and it really does help support the channel. So let's get on with the Novokh Dynasty today, and the Dynasty rules they have. It's called Awakened by Murder. So there's 3 bullet points here. The first is simply adding 1 to all your charge rolls made for units with this code. The second is whenever they make a melee attack, if they've charged, were charged, or they heroically intervened, you can improve the AP characteristics of the attack by 1. That's one way of counteracting Armour of Contempt, but we'll get onto that in a bit. And the third one, so when the Protocol of Hungry Void becomes active for your army, as long as you're using the Novokh code as your main Dynasty code, every model is going to be able to use both the directives of the command protocol as opposed to just the one. So what is Protocol of Hungry Void to begin? So there's Directive 1, when you're making melee attacks, an unmodified wound roll of a 6 will improve the AP by 1. That's actually going to stack with the previous one for the Dynasty code itself, not too bad. And Directive 2, whenever you do a melee attack on the charge, or if you were charged or heroically intervened, you're going to add 1 to your strength characteristics. That one I think is a pretty decent one, but yeah, you're going to be getting both of these if you are playing the Novokh Dynasty. So let's just check out the more unique items before we get onto our top 3 today. So first of all, the Warlord trait is Blood Fueled Fury. So whenever your Warlord makes a melee attack, an unmodified wound roll of a 6 will inflict a mortal wound on the target in addition to the normal damage. Now to be honest with you, I'm not a great fan of this one. Most of our character models that can take Warlord traits have 4 attacks base. They've still got a hit, likely on a 2+, and then once you get onto the stage of wounding, maybe you've got half a chance of getting a 6, and screwing 1 additional wound is probably not worth the command point to pay for the actual Warlord trait. Now as for the stratagem, Blood Rights is 1 command point. In the fight phase, when a Novokh unit from the army is selected to fight, you can add 1 to the attacks characteristics of all the models in the unit. That one could be really powerful. Now as for the relic, Blood Scythe. So you're going to replace your Void Scythe or your War Scythe with the following profile. So in fact it's the same profile as a War Scythe. It's strength +2, -4 AP, 2 damage, but has an additional ability which allows the bearer to make 2 additional attacks. Now if you take this back to the Warlord trait where I mentioned that the actual Warlord probably won't have enough attacks to justify having that Warlord trait, this may be a situation where it does, because now all of a sudden your Warlord is going to likely have 6 attacks as opposed to 4. Hitting on 2s on average you're going to get 5 hits. And if you're doing that in a couple of those fight phases, maybe it's worth it, but yeah, I still think it isn't, to be honest with you. Anyway, let's move on to our top 3. Okay, so when you're thinking about the Novokh Dynasty, you're thinking of our melee-based units. You're thinking of Canoptek Wraiths, you're thinking of Ophidian Destroyers, Skorpekh Destroyers, Lychguard, Flayed Ones, Canoptek Spiders, then any kind of character model that can actually buff those units, such as an Overlord with the My Will Be Done ability, or maybe a Chronomancer with a Chronometron ability to give an invuln save and the rerollable charge roll. So let's get on to the actual top 3 itself. In number 3, I've gone with Lychguard. Now it previously was Canoptek Wraiths, but I actually did some of the maths and I worked out that actually Lychguard are doing a lot more damage than the Canoptek Wraiths are. So let's have a little look at the Lychguard. They're either taking the Hyperphase Swords and Shields, or you're taking the War Scythes. If you're going against models that have got Toughness 4, Toughness 5 or Toughness 6, regardless of what weapon you take, you're going to be having 30 attacks with a 10-man unit, likely hitting 20 times. That's without any bonuses, any My Will Be Done and all that kind of stuff. Just bog standard, that's 20 hits on average, causing 13.3 wounds. Now of course if you've got the War Scythe, that's going to be doubled in terms of damage anyway, that'll be 26.6, or if you're taking the Hyperphase Swords, that's 13.3. So yeah, it kind of depends on what you want. If you want them a bit more resilient, then you're going to be taking the Swords and Shields, but if you are taking the War Scythes, then yeah, they're going to have strength 7. Now there's loads of ways to buff these guys. Let's go through some of these. We've already mentioned My Will Be Done with some of the Overlord models. Likely the Overlord on foot as opposed to the Catacomb Command Barge, for example. Core units within 9 inches get a +1 to their attack rolls. Hitting on 2s, not too bad. There's a few stratagem options to get extra attacks. Eternal Protectors is one. If you've got a Noble within 3 inches, you get 1 attack for each Lychguard model, as well as the Novokh Dynasty stratagem Blood Rights, as we've already mentioned in the intro, 1 attack for each model in the unit. So if you buy both of these in a single fight phase for a 10-man Lychguard unit, you're going to get +2 attacks per Lychguard model, so that's an additional 20 attacks there. So all in all, that Lychguard unit is actually going to have 50 attacks, and they'll be hitting on 2s as well, so it's quite nasty. In fact, if you want another attack per Lychguard model, you just take Amrakir the Traveller because he grants core units within 6 inches an additional attack. Now there's other ways of buffing these guys. Disruption Fields is another stratagem to improve the strength of the weapons by 1, or if you've got the Protocol of Hungry Void active, whether it's that battle round or for the entire game, likely for the entire game if you're playing the Novokh Dynasty, Directive 2 gives you the ability to add 1 to the strength's characteristics again. So if you actually stack both of the disruption fields as well as the protocol, you can get those hyperphase swords right up to strength 8. Now in some cases that's probably a little bit overkill. You don't need strength 8 when you've only got damage 1. You may as well just stick with the war scythes in that case, but you've got the option there. And there is a further way to actually improve the strength of the Lychguard models, but it is a little bit luck based, and it's if you're taking a Luminazares, using his mechanical augmentation ability. When you roll a d3 and you get a 1, you can plus 1 to the strength of your Lychguard there. Now if you are worried about dropping those shields because you're worried about their resiliency, take a Chronomancer. With that Chronometron ability, not only do they get a 5+ invulnerable save, but you're also going to be able to re-roll your charge rolls. So you can still take your war scythes, having the invuln save, having the re-rollable charge, easily get to strength 8 with all the stratagems and protocols, so they can be a real nasty unit. And in fact, you can even take a Veil of Darkness relic on your Chronomancer as well to get them 9 inches away from enemy models. So that's my third selection. I mean, that was pretty nasty alone. Let's move on to number 2, which I've gone with the Skorpekh Destroyers. So when you're taking a unit of 3 of these guys, 2 of the models are going to have the Hyperphase Threshers, 1 of them will have the Hyperphase Reap Blade. There's a buttload of attacks in there, and of course you're getting to reroll your hit rolls of a 1 because they're a Destroyer cult unit. Now they've got the same kind of gimmicks in terms of synergy. You could take the Marble Done from one of the Overlord kind of models. Probably better off taking the Catacomb Command Barge in this case because the Skorpekh Destroyers are much quicker than the Lychguard. Now don't get me wrong, you can get a standard Overlord on foot to advance with these guys, but you are then missing out on a few things every now and then. So I would just rather take a Catacomb Command Barge to keep up with your Skorpekh Destroyers. Now alternatively, you can take one of the Destroyer Lords, whether it's a Locust Lord or a Skorpekh Lord. Now they're not going to have the Mine Will Be Done ability, but they do have the United in Destruction Aura ability. So Destroy cult units within 6 inches will get to reroll wound rolls of a 1. So they're rerolling hit rolls of a 1, rerolling wound rolls of a 1, and these character models are actually quite punchy as well. Now we've already mentioned the Chronomancer in the previous entry, but he's definitely worth it with the Skorpekh Destroyers because they don't have an in-1 save, and now they're going to have a reroll to their charge roll as well. Definitely worth it. Now one last piece of unit synergy, which I always seem to forget when I'm selecting my Skorpekh Destroyers, is taking a Plasma Sight for 15 points. With the Infused Madness ability, you can add 1 to the strength and attacks of all models in the unit. Now it does come at a peril. You do have to roll a d6. On a 1, one of your Skorpekh Destroyers will be destroyed, so that kind of sucks a little bit, but you do get to really buff them up. Now we don't necessarily need to do this because there's lots of other ways to buff the strength up as we're about to go through in a moment, but if you wanted to use that, you've got the option there. So if you were to buff the strength up, very similar to the Lychguard, Disruption Field Stratagem for a command point, or Protocol of Hungry Void, Directive 2, that's also another way to add 1 to the strength. And don't forget again, Blood Rights if you want to add an additional attack per model in the unit. Now in fact I should mention they've got their unique stratagem, Whirling Onslaught. This is just for survivability to get into the actual fight because they do have to make their way across the battlefield, unless you're using a Veil of Darkness relic or something. But for 1 command point, when they're targeted by an enemy attack, it'll be a -1 to the attack's wound roll, which is actually a pretty big deal. It's almost similar to Quantum Shielding, but this is on your Skorpekh Destroyers. So that's number 2. Before we get into number 1, we're going to talk about the members' honourable mention today, and our member today is going to be Dan, one of our long-term members. I'm sure you've seen him on the Discord, and he has selected the Silent King. So why has he selected the Silent King? Well, first of all, you get 3 command points. Why does that affect the Novokh Dynasty? You've now got 3 command points where you can spend them on stratagems. We've gone through loads of stratagems already in this video. Blood Rights as an example, Disruption Fields. But you can also take advantage of that CP and buy yourself some relics, whether it's the Veil of Darkness relic, whether it's the Blood Scythe. Because with this chapter approved that we're currently on, the Nephilim chapter approved book, we're not starting with as much CP as we used to. But yeah, the Silent King gives you an additional 3 before the game even begins. Now of course the Silent King's got so many buffs. I'm not going to go through every single buff he's got, but I've picked out the ones that are going to affect the Novokh Dynasty. He's got that Fight Last ability, so any units that are within engagement range of the Silent King cannot fight until all eligible units in your army have done so. That's going to help your Novokh guys, of course. He's got Fair Enough Blades, so in melee you get to reroll all your wound rolls, and that's an aura for all your core units, as well as Triumph Praetorians, but that is also going to include the Silent King himself, so he's rerolling all his wound rolls on top of that. He's got the Relentless March aura, so he can be moving all your core units and Praetorians up the battlefield. It's only 1 inch, but you do get there much quicker in terms of getting into combat, and that will eventually reduce the charge roll because If you've moved an extra inch for a few turns previously, then you've just gained 2 inches, haven't you? He's got the My Will Be Done ability, so it's a +1 to your hit rolls, and of course it's got the Fair ability, so you can be using it on 2 different units completely there. Now he's got loads of weapons. Again, I'm not going to go through all the weapons. I just wanted to display them on the screen so you kind of know what kind of animal this thing is. And bear in mind with the Protocol of Hungry Void, wound rolls of a 6 will improve the AP by 1, and if you charge, was charged, or heroically intervened, you're going to get a +1 to the strength of all the weapons you see there. So he's going to be taking advantage of the command protocols, and that's why Dan has selected him. So we're going on to number 1 of the video today, and I've gone with the Flayed Ones. Now the Flayed Ones have the Flayer Claws. Now they're only strength 4, -1 AP, 1 damage, so at first glance that doesn't seem like a lot, does it? But they've got the Flesh Hunger ability, so when they're going up against non-vehicle units, any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 will inflict an additional hit. Not too bad at all. Now in other dynasties, you may take them in a unit of 5, deep strike them in for behind enemy lines, or trying to score a backline Treasures of Aeons or something like that. But when you're playing the Novokh Dynasty, you want to be taking them in a pack of 20. Now that is going to hurt your wallet just a little bit because these models are quite expensive, but you take a unit of 20 of them, and then you get out all the standard stuff that we've already kind of mentioned in this video today. Disruption Fields to add a bit of strength, Protocol of Hungry Void to add another bit of strength, so now you're up to strength 6 all of a sudden, Blood Rights for an additional attack. Now they've already got 3 attacks base, so now they're up to 4 attacks if you use Blood Rights. And then they've got their own 2 unique stratagems, which is the first one for 2 command points to be able to just simply fight again, pretty good, or Shadows of Drazak for a command point, which is subtracting 1 for the enemy attack hit rolls. I don't use that one as often as the previous one. I think fighting again is pretty good. That's if anything survives, that is. Now you can easily buff these guys because it's got the core keyword. My Will Be Done with an Overlord on foot. Works pretty good, so they're hitting on 2s. Chronometron ability from the Chronomancer again. Reroll your charge rolls. 5+ invulnerable save. Can't go wrong with that. And something that I always seem to forget when I'm playing Flayed Ones, they've got the Terrifying Foes Aura ability. So when an enemy unit is within 3 inches of your Flayed Ones, you subtract 2 from the leadership characteristics of models in that unit. So if they do survive and it gets to the morale phase, the likelihood is they're going to fail morale, whether it's because they've lost a lot of models, but also because it's a -2 to their actual leadership. So 1 should likely be running away, and then any 1s, possibly any 1s or 2s, will remove more models. So don't forget that one, it can literally change the game. But yeah, as for Flayed Ones, it's just the amount of attacks they get. They get 3 attacks each, and when you're buffing them up to the absolute max, they can literally just slice through anything. And that's why the Novokh Dynasty as a whole is pretty good, because the stratagems interact really nicely with the code itself, and as mentioned in the intro, it's one way of dealing with Armour of Contempt. So guys, that's my top 3 and the honourable mention for the Novokh Dynasty. Let me know your top 3 in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe if you are new to the channel. Other than that, all that's left to say guys is thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.